Welcome to another episode of Commercial Property Roadshow. You're here with Helen Tarrant, and today I'm actually going to talk to you about buying commercial property in residential zone. A lot of people are worried that if they're buying commercial property that's surrounded by residential, that they're limiting their actual tenants that's coming through. What could happen to that property in the future in terms of retenancy? Is it bad when you have a residential upstairs? And what can you do with that property in the long term? So here I want to share with you, so I'm just going to turn my screen around. So you get to see that I'm walking around here in the areas in around Chatswood, and you can see we've got residential. We now have, the back of Chatswood Chase. We've got commercial up the road. We've got more residential all around here. So you get to see more residential houses. We've got a park up there. And what we're also seeing is, if we walk up the road from here, is that we're actually seeing residential houses turned into commercial real estate. So if you just bear with me for a second as I go across here, I want to show you what's the change in terms of gentrifying in an area. So you will find that as an area changes, you will actually get a lot of commercial that's popping up in the residential houses. So in that sense, when you're having that change, you are seeing that the land value actually starts to grow. So you would actually get more rent in a commercial premise out of your residential property than you would if you were purely renting it out for residential purposes. So that's the number one upside. The other thing is, you're not limited to the tenants that will come in, but you are actually going to attract a particular type of tenant. So what you're likely to attract is a dental tenant, a medical tenant, a childcare type tenant, people who want to operate, a childcare at home. You would attract your non-sophisticated tenants like a beauty therapist, a hairdresser, and potentially you're also going to attract people who likes the work at home but also distribution into the future, which is what we're sort of moving towards at the moment, with more people being able to have a working office at home but also a distribution center as well. I've just walked up the road a little bit more, and you can see that one side of it, and I'm just going to expand that, you can see how one side of it has gone totally into commercial, and we're still having residential on one side. And as we walk up the road here, we're getting offices for lease, and we are getting more residential properties. But what we will find is that most of the zoning for the residential have changed into more commercial center zoning or business center zoning as well. And as a result of that, they can actually convert them into a commercial premise if they wanted to. So what's coming up here, what I'm seeing here is, for example, this house here is a prime idea of changing something like that into a dental clinic, or if you end up amalgamating this house and this house together, you can probably convert it either into a childcare center, or I will be converting it into a medical center. So these are prime because these are just right next door to this used to be totally residential, then they knocked it down and redeveloped it. Now this will be prime to do that too, into something that is more commercial driven than residential, and you're going to get a lot more uplift this way. So we already have a childcare center here. This used to be a dentist clinic, so this used to be a residential, then it used to be a dental clinic, and now it's got early learning center, which has just been built on the premise. But you can see it still had the old house at the front of it as well. So obviously here we're at a major intersection here in Chatswood. Lots and lots of trucks. Plus we can see that this was what the old house used to look like here. And then we've got residential down the bottom as well, next door, which is not doing anything. But we've got, this has been now done up with a disability ramp, and we've got just normal resi next door. So when you're looking at a property that is going to be that is a residential, but people operating their commercial property or their commercial business out of it, one of the things to think about is to think about long term, because when you buy a property, it's not just about now, it's about the future, and it's about what you're going to get out of the property as you change the tenant. Because you might start out with a tenant that is, let's say, a hairdressing and beauty tenant, but as the area changes and gentrifies, as more and more of the streets get developed, then you're going to be able to change that tenant to potentially having a more of an allied health type tenant, and then eventually to a tenant which might be a professional tenant, and then maybe into full medical or childcare or anything related to that. One of the things to look out for when you're doing commercial with resi component or a commercial in a residential zone is to look at first allowable use or permitted use is really important, and what your tenant coming in is going to be allowed to do. The other thing is look at any development and in terms of building up or extension, any of those specifications in that council area. And then the other thing to look for is where the other commercials are located. So that's really important. So if your other commercials are only 2 streets away or opposite the road or behind you, then that's a good sign in the next 10 years that is going to be developed out to more commercial. So what we're seeing generally is also what zoning it falls under, and whether there's a hospital, a school, or a shopping center that is being developed within like a 5 or 10k radius. Because if it's developed within a 5k radius, that whole area is likely to be rezoned, and what you're going to see is more commercial popping up in residential spaces. So that's just a little bit of a tip if you're looking for a property that is in a residential space and you're looking at that type of property and you're worried about the type of tenant. Yes, in the beginning you are not going to get your flashy tenants. Yes, in the beginning you are going to get your minimal yield. But as time changes, areas change. Remember, investing those type of properties is a long game, that you will be able to put in different types of tenants, and you might take 2, 3, 4 swaps of tenants to be getting the right type of tenant in there. So one example is this property we're about to go under contract in. This is in Bundaberg. It's got the way that it's done, it's got resi upstairs, and it's got a commercial tenant about to sign a 3-year lease at the front. The next door to it is vacant, and then there's a granny flat at the back. So what I see as a potential for something like this is that, yes, at the moment we'll get 2 tenants in there. It won't be flash tenants, but it will give us a minimal yield for holding. Then afterwards, what we're going to do is we might amalgamate the 2 sites into one downstairs office space and try to get a more sophisticated tenant in there. So there may be an allied health tenant, there might be, I might get an architectural firm, or I might get an engineering firm or town planner in there who likes this type of property, and I'll get them into the bottom space. Then I would probably refurbish upstairs a residential, turn it into a commercial space, and try to attract that as an office space, and then turn the granny flat eventually. In the beginning, I would have it as a residential, and that will give us some income, but eventually I will probably turn that into more of a storage warehouse space for maybe my current tenant as well. So long-term planning on something like this means that over time that property will continue to develop and continue to give. But to start out with, it's going to not, in the space of it, you're going to go, it's not flash, but what it will do is it will deliver over time, and it's about long-term hold and tweaking the property continuously for the next 5 to 7 to 10 years. But remember, building a commercial portfolio is not a trigger-happy coincidence or trigger happy decision. You've got to know what you're doing. You've got to partner yourself off with the experts. So that's what we're here to do. Reach out to me at helen@commercialpropertycashflow.com.au or helentarrant.com, and I look forward to helping you in a commercial property journey. Until then, happy hunting.